Elias Vance was a man whose life was built on blueprints of order. His days followed a rigid rhythm: wake before dawn, coffee with exactly 2 sugars, a precise 45-minute circuit workout, and then straight to his financial consulting firm in downtown Portland, Oregon. He prided himself on being dependable, consistent, and utterly predictable. That was why the strange, restless thrumming in his chest on this particular Friday was so unsettling. It marked their 7-year anniversary, 7 years since he had married Vivian Shore, the woman who had introduced chaos, beauty, and color into his once monochromatic world. All day, Elias couldn't settle. Spreadsheets blurred. Emails went unanswered. His pen tapped a nervous, rapid beat against his desk. He initially blamed the stress of a major client presentation, but he knew the truth lay elsewhere. There was an energy in the air, a quiet, insistent pull he couldn't name. That morning, Vivian had kissed him goodbye with a tenderness that lingered, her eyes sparkling with a subtle hint of secrecy. And then there was Lena, Vivian's younger sister, who had briefly stopped by their loft the night before. As she left, she had leaned close to Elias and whispered, "Not as a sister, but as a conspirator. Don't be late tomorrow. Elias, you'll regret it if you are." Those words, a playful threat, a serious command, had haunted him through meetings and lunch. His internal clock, usually his ally, now felt like an adversary. He usually worked until 8 p.m., but tonight, he found himself slamming his laptop shut at 6:28 p.m. Something was waiting for him at home, something he couldn't categorize, and he found himself desperate to meet it. The drive back to their Pearl District loft was a blur. Rain slicked the windshield, turning the city lights into impressionistic streaks. Elias barely registered the traffic. His mind was consumed by Vivian. Their marriage hadn't been seamless. There were quiet arguments about his preoccupation with money, weeks where he buried himself in the comfort of work, leaving Vivian to feel unseen. Yet, through all the storms, the core of their bond remained a deep, complex love. As he pulled into the underground garage, he felt the weight of their years. Their first anniversary was simple: burned garlic bread, cheap wine, and laughter until they ached. Now they carried the heft of responsibilities, regrets, and unspoken fears. He felt nervous climbing the stairs. What if tonight wasn't just dinner and flowers? Part 2. The threshold of revelation. The key turned in the lock with a soft click. Elias froze on the threshold. The loft was utterly transformed. The familiar industrial canvas of concrete and exposed brick was softened by candlelight. Shadows danced across the walls, glowing warmly. The faint sound of music, soft and melodic, drifted from the living room, the kind of jazz Vivian always played on slow weekend mornings. His pulse quickened. He stepped inside, his work boots sinking into a carpet of rose petals scattered across the polished floor. The air was rich with the scent of lilac, cedar, and something faintly sweet, like vanilla and anticipation. "Elias?" A voice called, gentle and tremulous. He looked up. Vivian stood in the archway, framed by the dancing candlelight. She wore a deep emerald dress that hugged her frame with quiet elegance. Her hair fell in loose waves, but it wasn't just her stunning beauty that stopped him. It was the raw, emotional effort in her eyes, a mix of vulnerability and joy. As if she were offering him a secret piece of herself. Beside her stood Lena. She was simply dressed, but radiated the same mysterious, electric energy. She smiled warmly, her eyes shining with a secret she had successfully guarded. For a moment, Elias felt his carefully ordered world tilt on its axis. Why was Lena here? Why tonight? "Happy anniversary, my love," Vivian whispered, her voice trembling slightly. Elias's throat tightened. He had expected a quiet dinner, maybe a toast. This felt like a ceremony, a revelation he hadn't prepared for. The sisters exchanged a quick, knowing glance, a silent language that excluded him entirely. He realized with a jolt that tonight was not about routine or dates. It was about truth. Vivian walked forward, her hand brushing his arm, a grounding touch. Lena remained near the table, a guardian of the moment. All he could do was follow. Part 3. The architecture of feeling Vivian guided him deeper. The living room was magical. Fairy lights woven along the beams, candles flickering everywhere, and a soft quilt draped across the leather couch. Everything was intentional, whispering of love, attention, and care. What? What is all this? Elias managed, his voice hoarse. Vivian smiled, but it was Lena who answered, her tone carrying that teasing warmth. You'll see, Elias. Just trust us. He sat down, his heart still hammering. The dining table, usually a graveyard for bills and forgotten paperwork, was immaculate. A crisp white cloth, gold-rimmed chargers, tall candles, and a covered silver dish, steam gently escaping Dot as Lena placed a glass of rich Cabernet in front of him. She caught his gaze. You didn't think we'd let you skip the 7-year mark, did you? Vivian sat across from him, her eyes locked on his. Elias, she said, her voice dropping low. I know our life hasn't been easy. I know there were times you felt far away, and times I thought you had stopped seeing me entirely. But tonight, I want to remind you of who we are and why we are still here. Her words hit him harder than any physical blow. He felt an intense need to respond, to defend himself, to tell her he always saw her. But the lump in his throat choked the words. They began dinner. Roasted duck breasts, garlic potatoes, simple, comforting, carrying the taste of home and intentional effort. Elias ate quietly, letting the flavors and the soft conversation wash over him. Lena and Vivian shared light stories, their laughter mixing with the music. Slowly, Elias allowed himself to relax, then, just as the meal ended, Lena slid a small, wrapped box across the table. Part 4. The unspoken vows. Elias stared at the box. Gifts were rare, usually practical. A new watch strap, a gift card. He carefully pulled away the paper, revealing a wooden frame. Inside was a photograph of him and Vivian from their 2nd year together, standing on a misty cliff along the Oregon coast. Vivian's hair was wild, his arm wrapped tight around her, both of them laughing. They looked reckless, wild, and completely alive, but it was the inscription on the wooden frame that truly caught his breath. For the man who showed us what love really looks like, beneath it were both their signatures. Vivian, and with you. His chest tightened, the sudden, overwhelming weight of memories pressing down. He remembered the arguments on that trip, the cheap motel, the terrifying drive through the fog, and the pure, unadulterated joy when they finally saw the ocean. That picture was a reminder of the man who had loved wildly before he became the man who only loved steadily. He looked up, his eyes stinging. Vivian's lips trembled. Lena watched with quiet pride. You two planned all this. For me? He managed, his voice a rough whisper. For us, Vivian corrected softly, but mostly for you. Because you forget sometimes what you mean to us. Dinner faded. They sipped wine, letting the memories dominate the space. Elias realized Lena had been their silent witness all these years, the one who saw the exhaustion, who comforted Vivian and who reminded them that family wasn't just two people, but everyone who held the pieces together. Vivian rose, circling the table until she stood behind him, wrapping her arms around his shoulders, her cheek against his hair. I don't want to lose what we have, Elias. I don't want us to forget how lucky we are. Part 5. The journal of patience. Elias held her tightly, the warmth seeping into him, the guilt heavy. He wanted to tell her everything, his fear of failure, the guilt of his distance, the gratitude for her patience. Before he could speak, Lena retrieved a small, worn notebook from the shelf. She handed it to him. "This is Vivian's," Lena said, her tone gentle. "She's been keeping it for years. She wants you to read it." Elias hesitated, then opened the journal. The entries were short, sometimes just a few lines. "He works too much. But I know he loves me. I miss the way he used to look at the sky. I hope he knows how proud I am of him, even when I don't say it. Today, he forgot to kiss me goodbye. I pretended I didn't notice. I hope the numbers on his screen are worth this silence." Each word was a cut, not of anger, but of loneliness. He felt the ache of her guarded love, the silent weight she had carried. When he closed the notebook, his eyes were burning. "I'm sorry," he whispered, his voice broken. "I'm sorry for every time I made you feel alone. I wasn't seeing you." Vivian leaned into him, her forehead pressing against his chest. "I don't need perfect, Elias. I just need you to be present. Not just in the same room, but here." Lena rose, walking toward the door. "I think that's my cue," she said softly. "This night was for the two of you. The rest you don't need me for." Elias met her gaze, gratitude overwhelming him. "Thank you, Lena, for everything." "Take care of her," Lena replied, a final command. "Take care of each other. That's the real gift." With that, she slipped out, leaving them alone in the soft, flickering glow. Part 6. The conscious rebuilding, the guilt remained, but it was tempered by resolve. Elias knew the man who had walked through the door tired, distracted, controlled by routine, was gone. In his place stood a man. The next morning, Elias made the first conscious change. He called his office. He didn't quit, but he informed his partners he was moving to a 4-day week, delegating crucial responsibilities he had hoarded for years. "I need to restructure," he told them. His voice firm, he began to rebuild his marriage with the same deliberate precision he used in his work. He started leaving small notes on the kitchen counter. He traded his evening workout for walks along the Willamette River with Vivian. He learned to listen for the unspoken, to ask about the day, not just as a formality, but with genuine curiosity. Vivian slowly lowered her guard. Her laughter became less forced. She started leaving her art supplies, oils and brushes on the dining table, a sign that she felt free to occupy the common space again. Elias learned that love demands attention, not survival. He realized that providing order and security wasn't enough. He needed to provide presence and emotional risk. Part 7. A new geometry 1 year later. Their second anniversary, the loft was quiet but full. It was just the two of them. Elias was in the kitchen, making Vivian's favorite French press coffee, 2 sugars precisely. He hadn't worked past 5 p.m. in 8 months. The feeling of safety was no longer heavy. It was expansive. Vivian came into the kitchen, wearing one of his old sweaters, and kissed him. "Happy anniversary, Elias." "Happy anniversary, my love," he replied. He realized the true gift of that night with Lena was not the intervention, but the permission to change. He had been liberated from the prison of his own routine. Lena sent a card from New York. She was traveling, pursuing her own career in interior design, fiercely independent, but always connected. "Your geometry is finally stable," her card read. 2 points defining 1 line. "It's perfect, Elias. Keep choosing her." He no longer resented the cost of that choice. The silence was gone, replaced by comfortable conversation and shared understanding. Elias Vance, the man of order, had finally learned that the most important construction he would ever complete wasn't a building or a financial plan, but the conscious daily architecture of his own heart. And that, he knew, was the greatest project of his life. The new rhythm held for nearly 2 years, but the world, unlike Elias's life, refused to be contained. The global market experienced a swift, brutal correction, the kind of volatility Elias had always prided himself on managing, and the kind that Vance Financial Consulting was supposed to weather. The chaos that Elias had once banished from his home now flooded his office. He watched a delegated high-risk portfolio, one he would have managed personally, in the past collapse, wiping out millions for a major client. The old panic surged back, powerful and overwhelming. The voice in his head, cold and precise, screamed, "Chaos is failure. You delegated. You failed." He saw the destruction of his career, the dissolution of his firm, the loss of stability, everything he had worked a lifetime to prevent. He worked all night, slipping back into the old pattern, fueled by black coffee and sheer terror. He didn't come home. He didn't call. He just worked, trying to build a firebreak around the catastrophe dot when he finally stumbled back into the loft. At 8 a.m., unshaven and smelling of stale coffee, Vivian was waiting. She wasn't angry. She was simply present, standing in the middle of the loft with her arms crossed, her eyes clear and unreadable. "You broke the contract," she stated, her voice quiet but firm. "You went back to the silence?" Elias threw his briefcase onto the concrete floor. "A major client lost 40%. The firm is at risk. The blueprints are useless when the earth shakes, Vivian." He watched her flinch, not from his anger, but from his regression. He saw the loneliness return to her eyes, the familiar gray of abandonment. "The blueprints were never about the market, Elias," she said. "They were about us. When the market shook, you didn't reach for me. You reached for the work. You chose the safety of the numbers over the risk of your heart." He stared at her, the truth piercing the fog of his panic. He hadn't failed at managing the market. He had failed at managing his fear, which was the same fear that had almost destroyed their marriage years earlier. "What do I do?" he asked, the question escaping him not as a professional query, but as a genuine, desperate plea. "I don't know how to fix this." "You don't fix it with hours or numbers," Vivian said, walking toward him, placing a hand on his chest, directly over his frantic, terrified heart. "You fix it with presence. You fix it with the truth. Come home, Elias." He wrapped his arms around her, burying his face in her hair, letting the cold rigidity of the blueprints shatter around him. He realized the real risk was not in the market, but in letting go of the woman holding him. Part 9. The ultimate blueprint, the new calling. Elias returned to the office that morning, not to salvage the numbers through sheer effort, but to salvage his integrity through transparency. He called his partners and demanded a meeting with the compromised client. He walked into the client meeting not as a financial guru, but as a man who understood the profound cost of risk, financial and emotional. He didn't offer excuses. He offered truth, walking them through the failure of the delegated strategy. But then he shifted. He explained how his personal breakdown, his obsession with control, had led to the blind delegation that caused the loss. He spoke about his new commitment to balance and presence. "I can rebuild your portfolio, and I will," Elias stated, looking the client in the eye. "But more importantly, I learned the lesson that I want to teach you. Risk management is life management. If your personal life is brittle, your judgment is compromised. My focus was wrong, and I will compensate your firm fully. But I ask you to stay because I have learned the most valuable lesson of my career." The client was stunned. The sheer honesty was disarming. They agreed to stay, not because of the collateral, but because of the vulnerability of the man they saw before them. Elias saved the firm, not by controlling chaos, but by embracing vulnerability. He liquidated his majority share, sold the firm to his partners, and stepped away entirely, keeping only a small advisory role. His next project was a partnership with Vivian. They co-authored a book, The Architecture of Presence: How to Build a Life That Won't Collapse. Elias wrote the financial and structural chapters. Vivian wrote the emotional and artistic chapters. Their venture transformed Elias from a risk manager to a life architect. He consulted for CEOs who, like him, were emotionally bankrupt but financially solvent, teaching them to budget time, delegate fear, and invest in presence. Part 10. The unwavering line years passed. Elias and Vivian, now in their early 60s, lived a life defined by their own conscious choices. They spent their days traveling, working on their co-consulting practice, and creating art. One quiet evening, sitting by the fire, Vivian handed Elias the original framed photograph from the Oregon cliff. "It's been a journey, hasn't it?" She mused. "It has," Elias agreed, holding the frame. "I look at this picture now, and I see two people who were alive, but profoundly unconscious. I spent so long trying to create a blueprint for the future that I missed the structure of the present." He picked up a pen and drew a careful, straight line below the original inscription, next to Vivian's signature. "What's that?" she asked. "That," Elias said, looking at her, his eyes clear and full of intentional love, "is the new 0 point. The unwavering line we chose together. It's the final blueprint, the architecture of my heart." He was no longer the man of predictable routine, but the man who was present, a structure built not of concrete and steel, but of honesty, attention, and intentional love. And that, he knew, was the only true stability he would ever need.